I'm Allie Zendrian, Editor-in-Chief of Brand News, and this is the Financial Services News You Might Have Missed podcast. This is where I uncover news gems that haven't gotten their full chance to sparkle, and I dust them off a little bit. I'm joined by my trusted co-host, and more importantly, my personal financial advisor, Galici of Galici Financial. So this is our first time back after Thanksgiving. How are you doing?
Doing pretty well. It was a nice break last week. We hosted some family at our place this year, which was first time, I think, hosting Thanksgiving. Overall, it went well and somehow didn't end up with an aggressive amount of food, so minimal food waste, but we definitely had more than enough of our fill of food. And I know that you brought a fur baby home, you even posted about it on LinkedIn recently.
We did, yes. So Pluto is officially home. He may make his entrance when he comes in from going outside. But yes, so had Thanksgiving and then Black Friday, drove to go get a dog.
Nice. Most people driving to the mall to trample for electronics. We picked up a dog.
Yes, hey, to each their own, I guess. So our first piece of news this week is from the CFP Board. So the group announced its November 2025 test results, which had a passing rate of 64%. What I really found most interesting from this announcement, though, was the fact that this was a record-setting year for people taking the CFP exam, with a total of 11,037 people. So I was curious, based on that, are you anecdotally seeing more CFPs, or do you see more reason for people going after the CFP?
Yeah, I think there was something in there. I didn't actually write down the specific data, but more firms, I think maybe 64%. Don't quote me, check out the article. Somewhere around there, though, a lot of people, their firms are helping them to some degree from a financial assistance perspective. So I think that's been huge. I've got a buddy at one of the big firms who he passed his CFP exam a few years ago, but I know that his firm is really doing a pretty big push to have more people do CFP and go through the curriculum. So I think there's a lot of that likely then leading to this record number, which again, I mean, I'm all for it. That, the more CFPs that we can get, again, having a designation doesn't by itself mean someone's going to be a good professional or necessarily have great ethics, but it at least drastically, in my opinion, increases the probability. And if I had two advisors to choose from and I know nothing about either of them, CFP versus non-CFP, I'm choosing CFP 100% of the time in that tiny scenario, at least.
Yeah. And I could understand why you would do that. What was interesting today, so the FPA Live, shout out to Ben Lewis for doing these fabulous groups. So there were 3 academics on there, and one of them was saying that she's noticing more students being at that confluence of wanting to help people, but also being math or financially inclined. So that's causing more students to turn up in her classes and whatnot. She also brought up a very good point, though, that this, given what we've seen with A, advisors aging out, and then B, there being less so filling in the gaps, that this is one of those few professions where you basically walk right out and you could easily have a job.
Yeah, we keep hearing about this transition because the average advisor age somehow keeps going up and up, which truthfully, I think speaks to how amazing our profession is. The fact that folks in their 60s and sometimes they're going into their 70s are choosing to not retire. I'm pretty sure most of them have the ability from a financial perspective if they have done any good financial planning by themselves. But at that stage, especially, they're likely working with their favorite clients, which also might have grown into great personal relationships as well. So we'll call it, they're working with their friends, likely have autonomy to be able to travel, spend time with grandkids, and do typical quote unquote retirement activities. But also they have a purpose from a business perspective. They get to have these amazing conversations and they get financially rewarded for it as well. So it's like, assuming you have the health and the ability to do it, why would you retire early if you're still doing all of the fun things to live a fulfilled life? So I think that's why the average age keeps ticking up, but eventually they will have to retire at a certain point. And I think some of the newer folks are going to be stepping in.
Yeah. And it's encouraging to see that more people are doing it, because it seems like all the articles had been basically, look, there are so many people aging out, there's no way that we're ever going to be able to backfill this. But that encouraging response of like, look, in all honesty, if you had to look around and say to yourself, like, I have a bachelor's in English, do you walk right out and you have a job? No, not necessarily. But, if you got your CFP, yeah, you've got yourself a job, and that was pretty darn smart on your part.
Right. And then just even to further this with some of the stats that it showed in the article, it said 72% were under 40 and 42% were under age 30. So we're even seeing that not only is there a record number, like you brought up, Allie, but also it's starting to become a lot of younger folks that are just getting into the industry. And again, if you have that's CFP after your name, or even if you don't yet have the experience, but you've passed the exam and you're at that point, I guess you'd be a CFP candidate. You just need that experience requirement. I mean, again, if a firm is looking, two similar people, one is a CFP candidate that just needs 2 to 3 years of actual experience, which of course they'll easily be able to get if they work at that firm, versus someone who doesn't yet have that and would take an investment from that firm, they're choosing the CFP candidate.
Exactly. I guess sort of along the lines of new candidates and whatnot. Everyone, hi, this is Pluto. Hi, Aww. Brandon, this is Pluto. Hi.
Hey, Pluto.
Hi, how are you? Right? Little 5-pound mini golden doodle of goodness. Do you want to go for your CFP? Do I need to save for that too? This guy seems to not understand that there is a cost associated with him. He seems to enjoy wanting to spend my working hours with him and not understanding that if I don't work to pay for him, there is no him.
Fair. Hey, as long as you don't go try and write him off as a guard dog for your home office, which I, believe it or not, have actually seen proposed by influencers on social media, you'll be good to go.
Okay, good to go. Anyway, now for more serious news. So our second bit of news this week is from the National Cryptocurrency Association, Coinbase, and Operation Hope. These three groups partnered together to start free crypto education for underserved communities across the country. There's going to be coursework, modules on how to recognize things like scams and risk, which is crucial for anyone who's going to be engaging with this asset, and short actionable lessons that take crypto complexities and make them understandable. Kudos to these three groups for coming together to do something like that. I know that we've talked in the past on the podcast about finding ways to make this A, engaging, and B, understandable. So anybody who does that, super appreciate it. Would love to hear what you thought of this.
Loved the financial literacy aspect of it, and specifically how it did lead with safety first, because again, because I think my biggest concern when it comes to any sort of investment education or even one very specific asset class like crypto would be if the education then leads to someone having way too much of a single asset class. In this example, it would be crypto in the portfolio. So I like that they're talking about even the scams that could potentially be going around, and safety first. I would also assume it means, hey, you should not put half or all of your portfolio in one asset class, whether it's crypto or whether another single stock. So I really appreciated that safety first aspect is what jumped out to me the most.
Yeah. And I think bringing this to communities. So, I mean, at the end of the day, that's where people are looking for their advice, just colloquially of, hey, so-and-so family member, community person who seems like financially they're doing well. And thinking of the concept of influencers typically being snake oil salespeople who have no business giving that kind of advice. This is basically a similar situation. You're asking somebody colloquially and like, do they have any business telling you about it? Like, probably not. But at least if you're getting it from a reliable source like this, you're getting all the facts and you can make that decision for yourself of whether it makes sense for you or not.
Agreed. It's going to be much less biased compared to the snake oil salesman and the majority of the finfluencers, which I promise I won't go on a TED talk, share fancy feelings about that. But what you're saying makes total sense. It's going to be a good, reliable source that you can just automatically, these are the big names, much higher likelihood of trusting because there's a little bit less of a conflict of interest. Of course, they would want you to invest in crypto. They do have a vested interest from that perspective, but more on a much larger scale compared to, again, one person being an affiliate of one particular product, a bit more conflict in the latter.
Yes, agreed. But actually, to give you a hot second, maybe to have fancy feelings about finfluencers. So actually, Laura Garfield of Idea Decanter, she's their co-founder, released her book about finfluencers. And if you guys are interested, it's half off on Amazon. So holiday presents. If you think that your financial advisor should become a finfluencer, this book is basically taking real life examples of advisors who have been doing video marketing very well and showing how that could, A, from a perception standpoint, be putting out viable advice versus the crap, basically, and B, also be good for their prospect pipeline. So just shout out to her.
Yeah. And what was the book called, Allie?
The title of the book is Find Your Finfluence, a financial advisor's guide to stand out and succeed with video.
I like it.
Well put, says it all right there.
Yeah, and I love it. And again, even tying back to the CFP part, me personally, I want more CFPs and real financial planners to get on social media. There's just not very many. Like I could almost name you off the top, like from a big influencer perspective, there just aren't many. It's usually I have paid off debt and therefore I'm now qualified for investments and tax and all this other advice. And I'm like, that's not how it works. Just because you've done one thing doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be great at it. Just like, say, a professional basketball player might have been one of the greatest ever, doesn't automatically even make them a good coach. So just because you've done something well financially doesn't necessarily mean that you are now an expert. But I'll keep my fancy feeling short. But that book sounds amazing, and I'm going to need to go and grab it as well.
At this point, I might send it to you. So maybe that'll be my Christmas present to you.
Fair.
So our third piece of news this week is from Employment Hero, and it's about how Canadians are being impacted by the economy, particularly on the job front. The press release said, quote unquote, while the job market crunch was felt across the workforce, the survey found Gen Z employees might be bearing the brunt of it as they experience underemployment, misalignment with their desired career fields, and a lack of confidence in career advancement opportunities. So there was a lot in there, but obviously feeling as if, you can't really get ahead in your career. The report found that 22% of Canadians across generations think that their current job is below their educational level, but that was 32% in Gen Z in particular. Also notably, 31% of all generations said that their job isn't in their desired field, but that was a striking 46% for Gen Z. So I realized we were also just talking about the CFP and how basically, you walk out and magic job right there for you. I've heard lots of things about people getting their degrees in history and whatnot and working in ancillary fields because there just aren't jobs available. I wonder if there's anything that we can do about it, or if this is a waiting for those older people to retire and then jobs to be available. Would love to get your thoughts on that.
Not as familiar, of course, with what our friends to the north are doing in Canada from what their college system is like. But if I can at least bring it to my understanding of how ours work, I think a lot of it is just the narrative has been college degree equals success. Has almost been a hard stop. And probably for a time that was probably a bit more true than it might be now. And it really is tough because we're burdening 18-year-olds, maybe parents, but even parents don't necessarily have all of the expertise on how to navigate the college structure. So we're asking 18-year-olds to essentially, hey, we're going to give you $50, $100 or more $1,000 to go and get a degree that may or may not result in you having a job after school. And I think that's one really, the system is clearly flawed. There's all sorts of ways that people have proposed on how to fix it. And I'm not claiming to be an expert on here's the exact way to do it, but can at least say, hey, it is flawed because, again, if certain majors, if you get a degree in, again, finance, or even if you go to a CFP certified program, very confident that if you apply yourself, you are going to likely get a job relatively quickly outside of school. If it's, just to use the classic example of underwater basket weaving, that's probably not necessarily going to help. So how do we find ways to balance and encourage kids that are going to school to think about, hey, have you looked at some of the jobs that you might want to have after school? I think there's a large subset that could end up being better off going to more of a trade school. My understanding is we have a deficiency in a lot of the trades where folks can earn a very good living. They can become business owners, as an electrician or plumber, etc. So again, the system's pretty much a mess, but if there could just be some level of additional intentionality to the 18, 19-year-olds that are potentially getting burdened with all of this debt before they do that, hey, have you seen, if you get this degree in history, what are the job prospects like? And then even utilizing that to, okay, what do I need to go to an out-of-state school, spend $100,000 to get out of debt? Or could I get the same degree, still what I'm passionate about, but end up getting it for a much lower cost? So then when I do get out, even if I can't find a job immediately, I'm at least maybe a little less stressed because I don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt for a degree that may or may not be giving a large payback in return.
So with that intentionality, it made me think, I wonder to what extent colleges are either helping people get internships or that students themselves are being more proactive about it. Not to say that in my case that my internship led to my job, because it did not, but having that experience, then either it directly correlating and somebody saying, but like, Brandon is so fabulous, of course I want to hire him. I've already spent 3 months training him over the summer. But it seems like that might be that missing step of like, at least if we got ourselves this far, like what are other experiences are we doing to take coursework that's in the classroom and making that directly applicable to what's going to be right after the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that on the job experience or internships and hopefully more paid internships versus the volunteer roles. But what was that like for you? What was your school's kind of process to help, sounds like you and likely some of your friends to get internships?
So they didn't necessarily help in either case, really. More so in graduate school, they helped a little bit. But in getting an internship, in all honesty, my first experience, I needed to quit that semester because I was basically going to get assistance in like stapling papers and handing them out across the neighborhood, which was like, explain to me how I'm going to get a job after this by showing people that I know how to. This is not going to help. So that was a good lesson in then doubling up the next semester so that I could graduate on time. But I did then subsequently find an internship that similarly like volunteered and did, but getting that experience because particularly so in my then field of journalism, if you want to show up to that first job and you've never had an article placed anywhere, it's not in your college paper, you've never interned somewhere, like you've never just had a friend's magazine that you've written for, good luck, because if you have nothing to show for yourself and nobody can vouch for the fact that you're good enough to do it, it's not really going to happen for you. So that really, I think, helped me propel myself steadily forward. But yeah, what about your experiences?
I absolutely loved my school. It's actually now a CFP certified program. It was not at the time, but it was like one class off. So it actually made me, when I got the CFP, I only had to take 1 or 2 extra courses instead of the whole 9 to 18 months, which was incredibly helpful. And now actually, I think West Liberty actually had their first student sit and pass for the exam after graduating, which is awesome. So again, same situation. Within a couple of years or 3 years, once the firm hires them, they're going to be able to use the marks pretty much right away, which is incredible. Just what I learned specifically was incredibly helpful, amazing professors. And then it wasn't directly an internship that the school provided me with, but because of my connections and I was active on campus, one of my buddies, his dad owned a tax firm locally. And he was like, hey, do you want to do taxes for my dad? Because he knew I was taking a tax planning course in school. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds pretty interesting. Sure. And then here we are years later, just picked up my enrolled agent exam, going to do some minimal tax prep work for a limited number of clients. And a lot of that, including yourself, and a lot of that was because of that, not exactly an internship, but because I got to work and get some level of experience, got to sit across the desk and communicate. And that really did give me a lot more confidence, even when I got hired by a large financial services company right after I graduated. And again, couldn't be more blessed. And I always give tons and tons of praise to the alma mater.
Well, and you know what, those kind of experiences are invaluable because whether it's, so that experience where obviously it propelled your love of taxes and tax returns and whatnot, and now you're adding that to among your career experiences. One of my internships in graduate school was actually on it at a TV station. And, I thought that was perhaps where I wanted to go. And then realized after experiencing it, it's great experience, but also not exactly where I belong, and nor does it make me happy. So also helpful to then check those things off the list and say, yeah, I shouldn't be putting my eggs in this basket because I don't really like it.
Right. And you didn't have to commit your entire career and years of your life to figure that out. You spent some level of internship, right? So that was great. So yeah, I'm all for how do we get as much relevant experience, whether it informs us. Actually, that's not as cool as I thought, or I absolutely do love this because no matter how much you read about any career field, until you actually go and at least get to experience it to some degree, we don't know. We have good ideas. We can make high probability guesses. Like you probably did. You thought, hey, I could like TV. Got into it. You're like, maybe not so much. But then that propelled you to where you're at now.
Yeah, exactly. But yes, so I wonder if that would be some of the solution to Gen Z feeling like, look, why did I get this fancy schmancy degree and it's not being utilized where I am? Or whether it's just waiting out those first few years and seeing what the job market comes. May they eventually find that fulfillment and happiness with A, their educational status, and then B, their career.
Yeah, absolutely. Fully agree.
Cool. Our final piece of news this week is also from Operation Hope. Apparently, I'm really loving them this week. Their fourth quarter results of the Hope Insider found that 79% of people expect to spend less this holiday season than they did last year. But on the flip side of that, 80% are optimistic that their career or job will improve next year. What I also found striking was that only 29% of people felt like they could handle a massive financial emergency if it were to come up. And 80% of people are living paycheck to paycheck, which was up 8 points from last year. So a lot of numbers in there and mostly not feeling good about things, although there's a glimmer of hope in there. I would love to get your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, not a surprise with the paycheck to paycheck one. I feel like we constantly see this on an annual basis on here's how many people are living paycheck to paycheck, even if they're making over six figures. It's paycheck. A lot are living paycheck to paycheck, and a lot of that could be where you live, because of course 100,000 in New York or California goes a heck of a lot less than it does back where I'm originally from in West Virginia. You have 100 grand in West Virginia, you're rocking and rolling pretty solid. 100 grand in our cities, maybe not so much. So I think that's a big part of it. You of course can blame lifestyle creep that naturally happens. We have had a good amount of inflation over the last 4 to 5 years as well, and things are more expensive. And specifically, the article noted housing. That wasn't a surprise. Pretty much everywhere. I mean, even in maybe not in smaller towns or in the middle of the Midwest that might have lower property values, but anything close to a large metro area in nearly any state, at least from my research, maybe there's an anomaly out there, but it's just housing especially is just getting pretty expensive, whether you're renting or right now pretty expensive to buy, because home prices have not only elevated, but we have the higher interest rates as well. So housing is likely the one that's causing the most. Yes, groceries are more expensive and some of those other day to day, but a large portion of many people's income goes towards housing to begin with. And so more inflation there is going to disproportionately impact their personal spending.
But so to that point about the 80% being more optimistic that their career or job is going to get better next year. So I know that we've talked in past weeks about how that's also been something that we're seeing, is that the economy doesn't necessarily correlate to a person's own like job status or where they see themselves, which I think is interesting, and it's telling, because then even whether that's that glimmer of hope or whether it's just like, look, I can control where my job is going. Maybe there are more entrepreneurs like us, but having that kind of feeling that at least my personal situation is going to get better, even if tariffs, the economy, whatever it is, goes to heck. It was good to see at the very least.
Yeah, I would fully agree with that too, where just having hope. Oftentimes, whether that's someone advancing in their current company, whether that's they feel confident that they've learned more skills or gained the experience to then get a new role somewhere else. Entrepreneurs, like you just mentioned, potentially a little bit easier, not going to say easy, right, easier potentially. Theoretically, we can go out and get one more client, and that could end up being more than a raise that someone would get on an annual basis. Now, we also, of course, have the risk of one of those clients could leave, and then now we have just taken a pay cut in the short term. So pros and cons to each, of course. But I do really think that word hope is so powerful, where even I bring this to financial planning, even if, let's say I meet with someone and we've got at least an initial one-page plan, even though likely nothing has changed in their financial situation, they're making the same amount of money, they haven't paid off any more debt, their net worth hasn't grown whatsoever, but they have a clear roadmap of at least their next actionable steps, and they can kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel or have some clarity in some direction, or again, with the word hope here, that is what is going to make them feel better, even though externally nothing has changed. But I think internally that hope is pretty powerful and can get people through even tough times from external circumstances.
Just to put an exclamation point on that, so you and I have personally experienced that, where you've outlined a plan for me, and yeah, exactly to your point. In that meeting that we had with you, I didn't get any extra clients. There was no like inheritance that magically came. There was nothing else that made my life better. But it was just the fact that, okay, well, there are steps, and now I understand which step I'm supposed to take and in what order. And it really does make you feel that much better, even if technically there's no reason to feel that way. It's really that someone's outlined what's going on and how it's going to get better. So thank you for providing that to me as well as your other clients.
Yeah, well, you're very welcome, and I appreciate it, and that makes me really happy to hear, because that's one of the greatest things that I get to do in the job, and other great financial planners get to do, just really helping people with that hope, feel better. Because if you're feeling better, even again, if nothing's changed, quality of life in almost every other area can improve, which is again why I'm so passionate about finances, financial planning in general. But yeah, appreciate your kind words.
Of course, anytime. Well, thank you as always for going on this journey with me, and looking forward to what shows up next week, perhaps with less puppy.
Yeah. Hey, I've honestly probably get more views with more puppy. So maybe we'll have more puppy. Actually, I'll get Perla on the next one. She was trying to bark a little bit during this one. Hopefully, it didn't come through too much. But yeah, probably more puppies. If we polled our audience, they would probably agree.
Now I'm wondering if we should just put both dogs up here instead, and like we're the people talking behind them, but the dog is just, yeah, you're right. I'd probably watch that more than I would watch myself.
Yeah. We'll get the views up. Just put our dogs on camera. We'll talk. It'd be great.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Awesome. Thanks, you too, Allie.